Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Finholm recording a review and reteaching lesson for concept number 9, 7th grade math at Red Wing High School. So 7th grade students, concept number 9, you'll recall, was multiplying and dividing rational numbers. We talked a lot last week about how we could turn our fractions and our rational numbers into decimals and do the multiplication that way, but we also need to know and remember how to um, solve rational numbers and multiply and divide them in fraction form, because there are a lot of places in the real world, like construction and measurement and fabric and cooking, where we actually do work with fractions and not decimals. We don't generally measure out 0.333 repeating cups of flour, for example. We use a third cup. So let's get rolling here. I'm going to pause my video for a second and encourage you to get a piece of scratch paper out. I'm also going to encourage you to have out and open on your device your Concept 9 assessment so that you can review and look back and see which problems did you struggle on, and you can lean in and take extra note of those problems when I look through them. So pause the video at this time and take a minute to get your work out. Welcome back. We all have our scratch paper or our notebook out, and we all have our assessment results up so that we can go back through and review. So let's take a look at question number 1 on our Concept 9 assessment. Sasha hikes into a canyon. She takes a break at the rest stations every 2/3 of a mile. If she started at sea level and has hiked down to the 4th rest station, what is Sasha's elevation now? So if she starts at sea level and she's going down, that means she's going to end up in negative land. Let's just draw out a quick little picture of that. So we have our sea level. Oops, where's my pen? There we go. Not sure why our pen isn't showing up. There we go. Okay. So at sea level, we've got 0 is sea level. And then we're headed down from there. And so she's going down in 2/3 intervals. So 2/3, 2/3, and then she goes down another 2/3, and she goes down another 2/3 and a fourth 2/3. And we want to know how far down below sea level is she. So when we look at how that functions and how that works, we could use repeated addition. So if you're not feeling quite confident with multiplying fractions yet, you could use repeated addition. But we could also think of this as she goes 2/3 4 times. Okay. And so 4 is the same as 4/1. And then we multiply across our tops. So 2 times 4 is 8, and 3 times 1 is 3. So one way that we could represent her distance below sea level is with -8/3. So there's one of our options that's correct. Okay. But we also can turn these into a mixed number. And so you might remember that we want to do that by thinking about how many wholes can we pull out. So I know that 3 times 2 is 6. If I pull 6 out, 8 minus 6 leaves me with 2/3 left. And we could double check that on Friday. Someone reminded us in our shared chat that we could double check this by saying 3 times 2 is 6. 6 plus 2 is 8. And so sure enough, we would have -2 and 2/3, or which we can think about as being very similar when we think about this word below sea level. So even though there's not a negative in front of it, the word below represents that negative value. Okay? And so there were 2 correct answer choices for number 1. Turning that improper fraction into a mixed number was really important. All right, let's clear our screen. And whoops, got to switch to an arrow there. Okay. And this one, I had several folks reach out and ask. I'm going to try to do a review problem of each of the 4 types. So our first question that we looked at here in this review video was question number 1, which reviewed multiplying fractions. Now we're going to look at and review multiplying mixed numbers. So I have -3/5 times -1.5. There are a lot of extra little steps in this problem, so let's take them one at a time. The first thing I'm going to do is think about my signs. A negative times a negative is going to become positive. So I know that my answer is going to be positive, which means I don't have to worry about these negatives anymore because a negative times a negative becomes positive. So then I have 3/5. Whoops. We know that we have to have both of our numbers in the same form in order to multiply them. So 1.5 is 1.5. We talked last week about how 0.5 is one of those sight decimals. We should just know it on sight. I know that 50 cents is half of a dollar. And to turn this mixed number into a fraction, we remember from 6th grade that we go around the horn. So 2 times 1 is 2. Plus 1 is 3 halves. So now we have our mixed number turned into a fraction, and we can do our multiplication. So 3 times 3 is 9, and 5 times 2 is 10. Now, when I look at my answer choices, I might have a little moment of panic because there isn't a 9/10. But there is. They just wrote it in a different form, right? So let's cross out some. Let's think about how these why these don't work. So letter A, we know won't be the correct answer because we know that our answer should be positive. The same holds true for letter B. We know our answer should be positive because negative times negative becomes positive. And now we look and we have to remember back to a 5th grade skill, which is being able to convert our fractions into decimals. And I know that 9/10 is 9 divided by 10, which becomes 0.9. And so letter D is the answer in decimal form. All right, so we've looked at and reviewed multiplying fractions. We've reviewed multiplying mixed numbers by turning them into fractions. Now let's move ahead and let's find a couple of dividing examples. All right, here is a great dividing example. In fact, it actually divides fractions and uses a mixed number in it as well. Okay, so oh, actually, this one is a multiplication example. Sorry, I didn't read fully. So lesson number 1 in this review is make sure you read every problem thoroughly and completely. Don't assume it's division until you read it. So an airplane descends at a rate of negative or of 2,700 feet in 1 minute. Okay, so it's going down 2,700 feet every minute. 2,700 in 1 minute. We want to know how far will it be after 3.5 minutes. So it's going to go down, down, down. So we could do a repeated addition to get it down all the way, or we could multiply by 3.5. So I know my airplane is descending, so it's changing in the negative direction. I can keep 27 over 1, 2,700 over 1. And I'm going to go around the horn. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7 halves. Okay. And now this looks like a really big beastie number. You can absolutely, like we talked about on Friday, let that calculator help you out. We want to use technology to our advantage in math. 2,700 times 7 will be our numerator. And 1 times 2 will give us 2 in the denominator. So you're going to get a really big number divided by 2. There's my helpful hint to get you started on problem number 4 on your concept assessment from concept 9, multiplying and dividing fractions. All right. This example, I had several folks ask about the second sentence in this question. So we're looking, this is for those visual learners. There were lots of you who shared our first week of class together that you were a visual learner. These number lines are meant to help those of you that are visual learners. So we can think about this as 3 arrows, and each arrow is 1.5 in the negative direction. It's not letting me slide and drop that. Let's see if I can make it work. No, it's not going to let me. But negative 1.5, 3 times negative 1.5 gives us a negative answer. And the bottom sentence was asking us to think about the sign of our math and our answer. And so the number line shows 3 groups of a negative number, which results in a negative product. So there's a little helpful hint on number 5. Okay. Quick review of some vocabulary that we learned in 6th grade, terminating and repeating decimals. So a terminating decimal is one that ends, like 6.25 or 1.789. It comes to an end. A repeating decimal is a decimal that goes on forever, like pi, or like 0.2323232323 dot dot dot. That dot 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 means it goes on forever. And we also should recognize this little notation here, that line over the top or that bar tells us that it repeats. So there's just a quick review of some vocabulary for you in number 7. And that should also help you with number 8. To turn a mixed number into a decimal, you'll recall from last week, we reviewed this when we did our adding and subtracting, which was concept 8 as well. We take our numerator divided by our denominator to turn that fraction into a decimal. Okay, here's some more turning fractions into decimals. Let's just make sure we remember how to write that fraction out. 9 friends vote on their favorite fruit. 1 person votes for kiwi. So 1 out of 9 votes for kiwi. To turn that into a decimal, we'll take our numerator divided by our denominator. Okay, numerator divided by our denominator, and yes, you can allow a calculator to help you do that long division. Oops, sorry, gotta switch my screen there. There we go. Okay. All right, here we go. Now we're getting to our division problems. So lots of folks asked about needing a review on dividing fractions and remembering that step of drop, flip, switch. Okay, so remember that dividing a fraction is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal, which means that we need to keep the first fraction, switch the division to multiplication, and flip the second fraction. Okay, so that would be our first step to be able to figure out what our answer is. The first thing we have to do is turn that division into multiplication. So we multiplied by the reciprocal of the second fraction. Now you'll notice none of these answer choices match that. So we have to do one more step to figure out what my conversion or what my equivalent expression would be. And the next step is to deal with these negatives. A negative times a negative becomes positive. So in this case, I can turn both of my negatives into positive numbers, which gives me letter D as the correct equivalent expression. Now let's